You're listening to episode 756 of the Father Bills podcast. Welcome back. This week's episode is entitled Jesus, Paul, John Paul II, and the Theology of the Body, given on the 22nd Sunday in Ordinary Time, 2020. This weekend, we had a wedding. Woohoo! Right? Yeah. And I hope you saw their picture as you walked in. You may have just blown right past it, but Sara and Herminio. And it was all in Spanish, and I'm pretty sure it was valid. Yeah, it was valid. Trust me, it was fine. But each time a couple comes to us to celebrate the sacrament of matrimony, we walk with them through the preparation process. This is one of those sacraments you just can't blow right through. I mean, when we do that, that causes all kinds of problems like divorce, annulments, and other problems, right? So the church has an obligation to uphold the dignity of the sacrament to make sure as far as possible three things are in place. One, that the couple is free to marry. Two, that they know what they are embarking upon. That's a big one. And three, that they pledge to do it. You know, no fingers behind the back as you do your vows kind of a thing. Like, I promise. The wedding is a joyous time. Or at least, we hope so, right? All right? Yeah. We have a few engaged couples here. Yeah. But it's also a time when the couples are nervous. Maybe you remember that. That's not a bad thing, for it shows indirectly that they are taking this thing called marriage seriously. In essence, the couple commit themselves to each other in a bond of love that is more than romance. A bond of love that is more than romance. And in fact, it's in a bond of choosing the good for the other, not themselves. In fact, Jesus' words to his disciples today in the gospel express something about that commitment. And while he wasn't speaking directly about marriage, let's put that lens on. He said this, remember, whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. What profit would there be for one to gain the whole world and forfeit his life? So you see, the sacrament of matrimony is the free will commitment of a man and a woman to lose themselves for their beloved. It's not, what can I get out of this? It's, what can I put into this? And by doing so, they then find themselves. They lose their life in the other and find their life in the other. So the covenant they make is unconditional and selfless. God and his church then blesses this covenant, blesses this love, for it images something of the Trinity, where two persons love each other so much that it begets a third person. Humanly speaking, 9 months later, the parents have to name that person. I like to give encouragement of Wilma or William. Those are two good names. I don't know why nobody takes me up on that, though. Maybe Wilma reminds them of the Flintstones. But William, come on, there's lots of Williams out there. But when a spouse turns in selfish ambition or just on their own will, they lose their life they had with their spouse. And what happens? The marriage crumbles. St. Paul, writing to the Christians in Rome, also offers us insight into marriage and the ethics of sexuality. Keep in mind, this is the lens we're placing on this text. He writes this: I urge you, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice. Your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God, your spiritual worship. Do not conform yourselves to this age, but be transformed by renewal of your mind, that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and pleasing and perfect. This is one of my favorite writings from Paul, this section. A whole homily just from that section alone, or a class could probably be offered. But here again, the marital bond is not one of being served, but serving, of making a sacrifice in love for the other. There's no vows that are valid. It says, I promise that you will do this to me, or for me. You will not find that. If you're married, you probably didn't say those things. If you did, we got to talk, because it's likely invalid. The sacrifice is one of the whole person, body and mind. In St. John Paul II's Theology of the Body, this text gains a new perspective whereby we are being challenged not to conform ourselves to the mores of our age, which has attempted to redefine marriage, or to allow unnecessary surgery for our bodies to fit what we prefer or want. You can fill in the gaps there. No. As in all matters of love, we are to sacrifice ourselves, accepting who God created us from before we were even conceived and stamped in our bodies and souls, that is our sex and consequently gender, given by God, not something we've made up, not something we choose. If anything, we are to open ourselves bodily to our spouses, sacrificing our own will, thereby mystically giving spiritual worship to God. I mean, do you hear what I just said? Giving your body and your mind to your spouse, which is a scary thing, and this is no endorsement of abuse in any way. When it is done in true love, it can be worship, not of the spouse, that's idolatry, but of God himself. Furthermore, we are to allow God to transform our minds. That one flesh union transforms our bodies, and if we allow it, can transform our minds. It is from our minds, as we all know, that our thoughts come. From those thoughts come decisions, and then behaviors. And those behaviors are lived out in our body, whether they be good things or bad things, holy things or sinful things. But see, the body is not inherently bad and not even neutral. It is very good. Genesis speaks of this. God created all the things, and he said they were good, but he waited to the last and created humanity. And he said it was very good, not just so-so, mediocre, very good. Why? Because we've been made in the image and likeness of God. And furthermore, Jesus himself sanctified the body by becoming incarnate. His becoming flesh, a human being, sanctified the very person that's human. In fact, it was scandalous to the people of the day, the faithful of the day, whether they be Greek or Jew. Why would God ever dare to bring himself down to become human flesh, to limit himself in time and space? Yep, that is the scandal. But it is the case. Many heresies have tried to dodge around that difficult theology. We have been then given divine wisdom from Jesus and St. Paul. We are to be mindful, like Jeremiah, how great God is and how much we need him. The psalm today, if we really listened, speaks about passion and thirsting for God. Think about our lives as human beings. We have passions and we thirst for people. This is something very difficult. Think about this. How many of us can actually say that we thirst for God? And if you can check mark that box, How many of us would actually dare say our flesh pines for God? That's kind of like, what? That's what I do with my spouse. God is the lover. We are his beloved. Herein lies a great mystery hidden in marriage. This is how we can pine for our spouse, knowing that that spouse has been given as a gift from God, and that we preciously treat that gift. You see, marriage and its passions and thirsts are intended to help us touch the divine and be transformed by him who is love itself. Yes, this is the theology of the body, the thesis of the theology of the body, that the passions, the joys, the ecstasies, the thirsts, the passions are not evil. They can be turned evil, but they are intended to touch the divine. That's why when someone's raped or someone's sexually abused, how damaging it can be. It's powerful. We can co-create with God, or we can destroy the person from the inside out. Yes, then John Paul II reminds us that making love with our spouse can be a physical and spiritual worship of God. Think about that. Making love as spiritual worship, if that's blowing your mind, you're finally listening, because that should blow your mind. When's the last time you've heard that at the pulpit, right? Huh? And if we are, but see, we got to be mindful that this is a sacrament. We're not worshiping the sex. We're not worshiping the person. Worshiping God in a sign of thanksgiving. So St. John Paul II shared that, knowing this, that a husband can lust over his wife, and this is not what we're called to. And both of them could commit adultery in their minds. See, we guys especially struggle with this because women, you are walking works of art. You are not objects to be lusted over. And what's needed? Well, what's needed is a transformation of our minds. So talking to married couples, especially wives, when this happens, they've told me that they know deep in their gut that they were not being loved by their husbands. They knew it. They were being used. So guys, we can't fake it. Well, I'm a celibate, so guys that are married, you can't fake it. Don't try. Okay, you're getting love advice from a priest today. What is needed again in this sacrament when these things fail? Because we're playing with fire. We need the sacrament of reconciliation and the transformation of our minds. What is not needed is to introduce those things of the world that demean the spouse and make the marital embrace, that's John Paul II's way of saying the sexual act, the marital embrace, sounds better at the dinner table and at the pulpit, is not just recreation, and even worse, made into a sacrilege, especially when it's intended to touch the divine. All of the popes since John Paul II have spoken that the love shared by husband and wife is intended to be a foreshadowing of heaven with all its ecstasy and joy. Do you think of heaven as ecstasy and joy? And if you haven't, hello, bing. It's a lot better than fluffy clouds and pearly gates, because I can go to the airport and get a pearly gate, and I can get on an airplane and fly and see some clouds. That's boring. And so again, it is for these reasons that the dignity of the sacrament needs to be protected and lifted up, not reduced to godless hedonism or license to do whatever we want. These are people we're talking about, husbands and wives. Such a way of life, that is, this hedonism, is a great obstacle to the true spiritual life that God wants for us in marriage. And deep down inside, we desire that intimate union. So do not conform yourselves to this age, but give yourselves in sacrifice to each other out of love of God in accordance with your situation in life. Me as a celibate, you as married, those of you who are engaged, those who are single or divorced or widowed. Each of us has a state in life, and we're called to give ourselves away. For when we give ourselves away, when we lose ourselves, we find ourselves. May the Holy Eucharist then help in that transformation of our minds this day, so that we in our bodies can make a spiritual sacrifice to God. And when we leave this church today, those who are married can renew their vows in love that they show in their spouse. And the rest of us can allow our minds to be transformed so that we may discern what is the will of God for us, what is good and pleasing and perfect.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the Father Bill's podcast. If you want to know more about the theology of the body, about which I just kind of hinted at in the homily, I encourage you to read anything from Christopher West. There's many other writers as well, but look at the theology of the body for beginners. You can also read other texts from other authors. Just Google the theology of the body, Pope John Paul II, etc., and you'll find more and more writings about that particular lens on marriage, which is awesome. Now, if you have any questions or comments, just go to my website, fatherbill.org, FRBILL.org, and there you can find my Facebook stuff, Instagram, Twitter, basically all the social media things going on, as well as a link to just email me directly through the website. And I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. In the meantime, may God bless you and have a great week. Oh, and especially be safe. Bye-bye.